Trailer Park Boys might seem, on first appearance, to be a show about little more than the tinpot exploits of a handful of Canadian trailer park recidivists. However, it is far more than that. It's about friendship. It's about picking yourself up and carrying on when you get knocked down. It's about the liquor. And perhaps most of all, it's about getting drunk, smoking dope, and eating chicken fingers. Anyway, perhaps you'd thought a show about trailer park denizens would not contain many interesting vehicles, in which case you'd be wrong. Trailer Park Boys is filled with a wide array of intriguing cars, from the most sublime whips down to the most rickety old jalopies. Therefore, without further ado, we will examine and rank the cars of Trailer Park Boys. That Dick Cyrus, who was first introduced to us in the first episode of Season 1 of Trailer Park Boys, drives this rather fabulous Chevrolet Corvette Stingray. In many respects, just as Ricky and Lahey's Chrysler New Yorkers are two sides of the same coin, so too are Cyrus and Julian similar. Both are black-haired, black-clad giants with leadership ability, a keen interest in firearms, and a fabulous taste in vehicular transportation. However, if big-hearted Julian is chaotic good, then Cyrus, who is presumably named after the infamous Achaemenid Persian emperor Cyrus the Great, is chaotic evil. Not only does Cyrus attempt to take control of the trailer park in the very first episode in which he is introduced, but he periodically appears throughout subsequent seasons to throw a proverbial spanner into the works of our protagonist's criminal machinations, always blasting "I'm old, you're young" by Jeffery when he appears in his cherry red whip. Duplicitous, headstrong and unyielding, Cyrus features especially heavily in Season 5, in which he pursues a vendetta against the boys for stealing his hash and is bailed out of jail by Lahey and Bobandy to play the part of a so-called shit puppet. Anyway, the Corvette. An excellent car for a man like Cyrus to drive, since he is a complete dickhead. Cyrus's Corvette is a little more battered than the average garage queen, and what's more, the faded red paintwork sadly gets vandalized by Ricky when he stumbles upon Cyrus's car. Cyrus may deserve it, but the lovely third-generation Corvette doesn't. The low profile, the pleasing proportions, and the beautiful flow of the bodywork over the wheel arches make these third-gen Corvettes incredibly charming. In 1978, for the Corvette's 25th anniversary, thousands of Indy Pace Car Special Editions were produced. The 79 models continued the bucket seats, rear spoiler, which supposedly increased fuel efficiency by half a mile per gallon, and glass roof panels of these special editions. Interestingly, the 79 model year was apparently the year in which the most Corvettes were produced. Even more interesting is that only 20% of these reported 53,807 models were equipped with manual gearboxes. A crying shame. Despite the fact that it is probably an auto, I absolutely love Cyrus's Corvette. Now fuck off, I've got work to do. Safety always off. 9mm out of 10. The massive block-sided, fully rigged ocean-going cruise liner that is the 1975 Chrysler New Yorker was immaculately timed. The release of the 4C model coincided almost perfectly with the 1973 OPEC oil embargo, in which the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries implemented a near-total embargo upon the sale of oil to nations who had supported Israel during the 1973 Yom Kippur War. The price of a barrel of oil went from $3 to a staggering $12, meaning that the New Yorker, which posted an incredible 10.5 miles to the gallon, suddenly became eye-wateringly expensive to run overnight. Lahey's New Yorker Brougham is a 1976 model. 1975 New Yorkers were pretty much a carryover from the 1974 year, whilst the 76 model introduced more notable stylistic changes. Namely that the Imperial LeBaron a vehicle from Chrysler's luxury arm, which was retired around 1975, lent its styling to the New Yorker. This can most clearly be seen in the front end of the car, of course, with its covered headlights and enormous vertical grille, and the vertical tail lamp and peaked fenders of the rear. The 76 New Yorker inherited the interior styling of the LeBaron too, with leather and luxury fabric upgrades also being available to purchase. Chrysler enjoyed a nice sales boost as this revised styling appealed to customers, one of which was apparently Jim Lahey. I can fully see why. The car is incredible, outrageously ostentatious, supremely luxurious to sit in, and built like a brick shithouse. The padded Chesterfield upholstery of the New Yorker lends the vehicle an almost aristocratic air, creating an interior akin to some sort of slightly gauche mid-century modernist drawing room. Lahey's New Yorker would likely have had the 6.6 or 7.2 litre V8, producing 175 horsepower. 0 to 60 was reportedly in the region of 12 to 13 seconds. Really not that dreadful when you consider the astounding bulk of this behemoth. The damn thing weighs 4,832 pounds.
That's 19,328 cheeseburgers.
Such a magnificent automobile was, and is, a true luxury, a fine piece of engineering aimed at the burgeoning American middle classes. It was not, perhaps, intended to be owned by drunken trailer park supervisors, and Jim Lahey's sublime New Yorker suffers dreadfully under his ownership. Throughout the seasons, as Jim lapses into ever-deepening bouts of depraved inebriation, his New Yorker begins to bear the marks of his indiscretions. Indeed, in the Trailer Park Boys movie, set in between seasons 5 and 6, the roof is wholly torn off the New Yorker. Ray's stint as supervisor in season 6 sees him pilot the beleaguered New Yorker in perhaps even worse fashion than the great Jim Lahey. The old shitliner's coming to port, and I'll be here to tie her up. 8.4 shit apples out of 10. Just as Newton's third law of motion states that all actions have their equal and opposite reaction, the wonderful 1976 Chrysler New Yorker of Mr. Jim Lahey Esquire has its equal and opposite in Ricky LaFleur's ramshackle 75 model. Or perhaps it would be more appropriate to describe the shitmobile, as it is known, as the alter ego of the Liquor's beige New Yorker. Semantics aside, Ricky's wagon is a consummate pick, a homage to the haywire nature of its owner. It is only fitting that as the embodiment of chaos itself, Ricky drives such an unbelievably dilapidated car. Its once green paintwork, rather poorly resprayed black at some stage, is peeling horribly. Not a single panel of its metal-plated carapace is without some form of dent or scratch. The passenger door is missing, and the driver's door does not open. The car has an odd collection of mismatched wheels, and is even driven without a tyre or two at times. Finally, the transmission is non-standard, as Ricky explains to Corey and Trevor.
First up drive doesn't work, but third does. Neutral is park, reverse is second. If you want to use reverse, put it in drive. You got it?
Yeah, I got it.
And the accelerator sticks too, so be careful. But don't be afraid of it. You got to give it to her, it's going to stall.
Mechanically, there is little to add from our review of Lahey's New Yorker, aside from the obvious styling differences, particularly with regard to the headlights and rear light and fins. The other primary difference between the shitmobile and the Liquor's land yacht is that Ricky's car also serves as his place of residence for many seasons of Trailer Park Boys. Apart from the few episodes where Ricky is allowed to lay his head inside some trailer belonging to one of Sunnyvale's residents, he lives, cooks, eats, sleeps, grows weed and bangs inside his disintegrating vehicle after he is gifted the car by Julian in the second episode of Season 1, Julian himself having inherited the car from his grandmother. To that end, we often see the shitmobile littered with Ricky's personal effects, both inside and out, and he can regularly be seen toasting chicken fingers on the roof or the bonnet of the vehicle. But what happens, you ask, if there's a worst-case Ontario and Ricky requires the transportation services of the shitmobile in a hurry? Well, that's where the clearing stick comes in. No need for the expensive cleaning and hoovering operations that any normal abode requires. Instead, Ricky simply takes the stick, an old hockey stick by the looks of it, and sweeps any and all debris off the shipmobile and onto the floor, instantly rendering the vehicle usable. What is perhaps most astounding, however, is that Ricky apparently uses the vehicle somewhat regularly without constantly being pulled over, particularly considering the fact that he is operating it without insurance, presumably without a license, and very often drinking liquor at the wheel. But then again, as we are shown in Season 1, Ricky's gift of the gab when attempting to get out of trouble with the police is immense, especially when he uses the Jim trick and tells them that his name is Randy Lahey. All in all, the shipmobile is iconic. I just love that Ricky uses it in such a ridiculous fashion, including driving 20 feet down the road when he could have just walked. Mayhem in motion, 6.2 jalapeno chips out of 10. Philadelphia Collins. This mountain of a man, first introduced in Season 4, Episode 3 as a motel manager whose business is raided by Ricky, Julian, and Bubbles in order to loot furniture for their impromptu rub and tug business, returns in Season 7 with this rather tired-looking 1971 Dodge Sportsman recreational vehicle. The Dodge is an interesting thing. From 1970 to 78, Dodge produced the first generation of the B-Series vans, which came in a variety of payloads and wheelbases. Judging by the fact that it's got an enormous RV slapped on the back of it, Phil's Dodge must be the 1-ton rated 300 spec, with a 127-inch wheelbase. Despite being rather large, the motorhome portion of the Dodge clearly isn't dreadfully well equipped, as evidenced by the fact that Phil is bathing within the Sportsman using a pail of warm soapy water and a sponge. Either that, or the RV's shower arrangement is broken. Looking at the interior of Phil's whip, this seems most likely. In fact, the Dodge does not actually belong to the Great Mustard Tiger. When that disgusting caveman Sam Losco holds Phil at gunpoint in Season 7, he does so in order to extract the rent money that Phil owes him for the RV, which is functioning not only as his home, but as his place of business, the so-called Dirty Burger restaurant, which he operates alongside his business partner, big coagulated gravy hot dog bun bastard Randy. One must imagine that Phil's Sportsman must carry with it an overwhelming smell of burger. It would appear that Phil does tend to burn his burgers, which would indicate an altogether more acrid and offensive scent. Now that is greasy. Incidentally, there is a chance that some of you may recognise my voice from another Trailer Park Boys themed video. I did actually make a tutorial on how to recreate the Mustard Tiger's famous dirty burgers a couple of years back. I'll put the link in the comments. Just like its owner, the Dodge is sprawling and dishevelled. Phil, of course, being infamous for his too small t-shirts, into which he is barely able to fit his ample frame. We, the viewer, are subjected, or treated, depending upon your inclination, to a full view of the nether regions of Phil's vast stomach, virtually every time he is on screen. Fucking walrus. Fry, easy lover, fry. 4.4 belches out of 10. Julian, or Jules, also referred to as Sexian by Jim Lahey, is the belligerently sexy king of Sunnyvale Trailer Park. A suave and no-nonsense operator, Julian is canny and intelligent, never to be found without a rum and coke in hand. It is from the mind of Julian that many of the boys' plans originate, at least the less harebrained ones, and it is Julian's schemes which tend to provide the overarching plots for many of the seasons of Trailer Park Boys. For example, in Season 5, where Jules orchestrates the theft, storage, and subsequent selling of a veritable mountain of hash stolen from the Flappy Bird brothers, Terry and Dennis. In fact, it is from these greasy bathrobe-wearing brothers that Julian obtains this fine Chevrolet Monte Carlo. Before we go any further, it should be pointed out that Julian also drives a variety of vehicles throughout the seasons of Trailer Park Boys, all of which display his impeccable taste. The wonderful Ford Bronco of Season 1, the faded red Pontiac Firebird, and even the DeLorean which he drives during the Say Goodnight to the Bad Guys special, set just after the conclusion of Season 7. However, the Monte Carlo is perhaps the car which can be most readily associated with Julian, appearing regularly from Seasons 5 to 7 until it meets a rather ignominious end in a river whilst being driven by Jacob Collins. In any case, Julian initially appears to take a rather dim view of the Monte Carlo, referring to the rims as whack. However, it soon becomes apparent that his disdain for the vehicle derives solely from his contempt for its owners, as he actively chooses to continue driving this rather fine car after it is stolen from Terry and Dennis. In fact, so attached to the Monte Carlo does Julian become that when he lends it to Jacob in his shitheels in Season 7, he states that car is my life. This isn't the only Monte Carlo I have reviewed, as Jesse Pinkman of Breaking Bad fame pilots a red lowrider 82 model in Season 1 of that show. Julian's Monte Carlo, like Jesse's, is a 4th gen, with those wonderful square headlights and dominant grille. Unlike Jesse's, Julian's whip is solid black, a shade which not only perfectly complements his low-key, business-like attitude, but also his wardrobe, which is filled exclusively with blue jeans and increasingly figure-hugging black t-shirts. It must be admitted that the slickness of Julian's car is somewhat decreased by the addition of a spoiler fashioned from hockey sticks, which J-Rock and the Rockpile fit to the Monte Carlo. That said, the vehicle is intensely cool nonetheless. Sleek black beauty, 8.7 Patricks out of Swayze. Bubs, the shed-dwelling, cat-loving third of the Sunnyvale Trailer Park Triumvirate. Bubbles, owing in no small part to his inherent anxiousness and his thick bottle-end glasses, does not have a car throughout the early seasons of Trailer Park Boys. That isn't to say that Bubbles can't drive. Far from it. Despite failing his CDL test in Season 4 for not being able to see jack shit, Bubbles does in fact drive a truck as part of the boys' commercial weed-growing scheme, and is arrested for driving without a license at the climax of that season. He does also obtain a little Mitsubishi K truck in Season 12, which appears to be an early 1990s minicab model, but to be frank, I think that Bubbles is primarily associated with his go-kart. Bubbles obtains the go-kart in Episode 1 of Season 3, when Ricky purchases the vehicle for his old bud from his share of the Freedom 35 profits, and Bubbles can be seen pootling about in the kart for a couple of seasons. I'm not sure quite what I can say about the go-kart. I'm afraid I don't really know anything about go-karts. It is very loud and very, very slow, particularly when being used to carry more than one passenger. Bubbles picks up the passed out in the road drunk Ricky, using the cart and an additional trailer, limping away afterwards at a pace far slower than walking. It evidently doesn't have much torque either, as when Bubbles lends the cart to Ricky so that he can pick his daughter Trinity up from jail, he immediately gets the vehicle stuck in a rather small patch of mud. Although this may have more to do with the operator of the cart, rather than the cart itself. I do understand how Bubbles must have felt driving about in his go-kart, given that this has been my daily driver for the past few months. I must say, this cartoonishly short wheelbase is a lot of fun. Anyway, the cart is a very fitting transport for Bubbles. Ricky and Julian see him almost as a sort of innocent younger brother figure, regularly taking the fall so that Bubbles doesn't have to do any jail time. So a go-kart is a suitably childish transport for the boyish bubs. The way of the road, bubs, the way of the road. 2.1 kitties out of 10. Thomas Collins, brother to Jacob and son to the redoubtable Philadelphia, is a relatively short-lived character, only appearing in a few episodes of Season 7 of Trailer Park Boys, ostensibly in order to aid his walrus-like father protecting Jacob Collins, who has recently returned from the Canadian wilderness in an effort to lay model railway tracks in order to smuggle dope into the United States. Like his brother Jacob, Thomas is tall and thin. Unlike his rather shy and retiring brother, Thomas is self-assured, bolshy, and not altogether very nice. Not one to back down, Thomas gets into several physical altercations with various members of Sunnyvale, throwing his paltry weight about to great effect, pushing and shoving Julian and Ricky, and even getting into a spat with that dirty troglodyte Sam Losco. All that aside, Thomas's confidence appears to have served him well if his vehicle is anything to go by. As the man himself says,
16 years of positive thinking and education have manifested themselves in a mint condition 1967 RS Camaro.
Who am I to disagree? But this wonderful vehicle is a real beauty. At first appearance, perhaps a strange pick for the weedy-looking Thomas Collins, the brawny Camaro, as it turns out, suits his hot-headed personality rather nicely, particularly in this aggressive black with chrome highlights. A first-generation vehicle, 8 different engines were available with the 67 model year. Now I'd like to tell you that my finely attuned sense of hearing is able to pick out exactly which of these engines powers Thomas's car, but that simply would not be accurate. Suffice it to say that whichever engine it is, it was incredibly thirsty and sounded rather wonderful. Base models were fitted with a 3.8-litre straight 6, top of the range, a 6.5-litre V8. As Thomas himself points out, the Camaro is an RS, the appearance-based package. This option, available with any model, came fitted with retractable headlight covers, which slid horizontally behind the grille when opened, along with reversing lights which were hidden under the rear bumper. They also came fitted with an RS badge, because how else are boomers going to show off the model of their pride and joy Chevy, which they purchased after 500xing their money on a house which they bought for $1,000 in the 1970s after working a summer job at a car wash. Raw American muscle, 7.9 BAMs out of 10. With that, we come to the end of our analysis. Let us move on to the ranking. At the bottom of the pile comes Bubs and his little go-kart. Next up is the Mustard Tigers Dodge Sportsman camper. In 5th place we have the legendary Shitmobile, residence of Ricky LaFleur. Beating Ricky to 4th is Thomas Collins and his Camaro. Winning bronze is Jim the Licker Lahey and his barge-like Chrysler New Yorker. Runner-up is black-clad Julian and his lovely Monte Carlo. And occupying 1st place, I hate to say it, is that dick Cyrus and his faded red Corvette Stingray. Thanks for watching. And for having the patience to keep watching, despite it taking me months to make each one of these.